turn our attention, though, back once again to the issue of not just GBV, but DNA backlogs in the country. We know the two cannot be separated. The Western Cape now, for years, has been complaining about the backlog for DNA results and testing at the SAPS Forensic Sciences Laboratory in the province. Let's go down to our reporter, Monique Mortlock, on this for us today as well. Hello to you, Monique. And as we continue our focus on delays inside courts, delays regarding investigations, delays regarding prosecutions, there are obviously delays when it comes to evidence, and DNA is a huge part of that, isn't it?
Definitely, and here in the Western Cape, we've seen over the years how that sort of political battle between Western Cape government and the National Police Minister and the SAPS, where Western Cape government has for years been calling for more police resources, first of all, in especially those gang-ridden communities like Manenberg, Hanover Park, and where I come from, Kraaifontein, and calling for more detectives, because they say detectives are inundated with a really massive caseload, and this is why Western Cape government believes you see the slow turnover of cases in courts when it eventually ends up in courts. They've also complained about that that massive DNA backlog at the Forensic Sciences Laboratory that over the years has been caused by various factors like not the correct DNA processing equipment and not enough staff, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic having an impact on that. But we know that according to the Community Safety Department, that the SAPS has been making inroads in tackling this massive DNA backlog, as the Police Minister has promised to do over the last couple of years. But is it enough? That's what we're going to find out a little later when we speak to the Community Safety MEC. But when we're speaking about what happens in courts, one has to factor in all those different entities that eventually lead to justice being served for victims, for families. And I'm speaking about your safety structures like your community policing forum. Police work hand in hand with them along with communities, and that's why I'm speaking to my guest this morning outside the Strand Police Station, Ms. Francina Lucas. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning. She's from the Western Cape Community Policing Forum. As I mentioned, you have the unique position of working on the ground with residents, with communities, and serving as a bridge between residents and the police. What gaps do you often see in our justice system, especially when we see cases being either thrown out of court or taking years to eventually get to trial?
Good morning, Monique. Good morning to the viewers. As we know, the criminal justice system consists of 5 pillars. 1 being law enforcement, the police. 2, the NPA. Then we also have the courts and the correctional service. And then lastly, and most importantly for us, it's the 5th pillar, which is the community. I think if we have a system that works smoothly with all those entities, we will see less of the problems that we're currently experiencing. What we see on the ground as a community is still that too many cases are struck off the roll because of not sufficient evidence or referred back to the investigating officer to do more investigating and to return the docket to court. What we also experience is that for many women, victims of GBV, that comes to the community police service stations being turned away still and being told, go to court, go and get a protection order. And that is totally unacceptable, because if the woman comes on a Saturday or on a Friday to the police station being sent back to court on a Monday to get a protection order, it might happen that with what we see is the high stats in GBV and femicide. That is totally unacceptable. If the system worked for the victims of crime, we would see less incidents of GBV, we would see more perpetrators behind bars, and we would see that there are less men taking chances, thinking they can beat the system by murdering women, by assaulting women, and doing all those things which is infringing on the rights of the victim, in most cases, women.
And lastly, you mentioned all those pillars needing to work together correctly for the justice system to work. How do we go about, what do you think is needed? Is it the community that needs to work with police when it comes to police, for example, needing witnesses, or is it the police needing resources, as we've heard from Western Cape government? What is it that's lacking here?
Let me start with the community. As one of the pillars in the system, it's very important for us to participate, to oppose bail where bail must be opposed, for rapes, for murders of women and children, and other young adults, as we see in the community due to gangsterism. We also must make sure that as a community we rise and that we have a voice. If we want to say crime must fall, then communities must rise. We also need to see more resources, yes, more resources for police. We know the detectives have a very, very, very high caseload. We have detectives that is one detective, for an example, working with 250 dockets. I think they can never do justice to the victims in that manner, because there are too many cases that needs their attention, and that will also lead to some loopholes in the system. We also still find that cases are withdrawn temporarily from the court because of DNA evidence. There's a backlog at the labs, and that must be addressed as a matter of urgency.
Thank you very much. That was Ms. Francina Lucas sharing her insights. She's from the Western Cape Community Policing Forum, and hopefully we will get some answers from the eNCA a little later, and also the Community Safety MEC. And important to note, we have reached out to Western Cape SAPS requesting an interview either with the Police Commissioner or the Deputy Police Commissioner or anyone from the SAPS, but we were informed that the SAPS says they don't have a mandate to speak on these matters, and that we should instead speak to the NPA, even though the questions that I pose does relate specifically to what is happening here in the Western Cape.
Yeah, certainly it does, and I even had a chance to speak, Monique, to the police minister yesterday on the show, Minister Becky Ele, and I asked him about the DNA backlog. He says that they are making progress. By September or later this year, they should be on top of it, they say. Is that the case, Monique Mortlock? We're going to stay on top of that story. In fact, when we come back to add to what Monique is talking about, I'm going to be hearing